So I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I've been in practice in Camarillo, which is in Ventura County, which compared to here, this is considered the hinterlands of from where I'm at. I always venture about once a year to come down here just because Charmin asked me. It's always kind of scary for me to drive into the big city, but I managed to find it just fine. Charmin mentioned, that most mental health professionals are very unaware, and that is not something I'm proud of. And I would say that it took me a whack on the side of the head, quite literally, several years ago, many years ago now. I think it's probably been 10 or 11 when I first met Robert Knudsen, who's one of the co-founders of the Pituitary Network Association, who happens to be a neighbor of mine, just happens to be fate. And anyway, if any of you know him, he comes across kind of strong and almost evangelical, which, was not something that I was receptive to. He kind of approached me many years ago, and I've told this story many times, so he's heard this. And I thought what he had to say was crazy, because I figured that I'm a pretty well-educated person. I've been to graduate school, and I've tried to keep up in my profession. I pride myself. I've been in many leadership positions. I'm currently the president of a large division, California division of family therapists. So I'm very politically active, and so I really pride myself. So how could I be hearing something for the first time from a neighbor that lives 2 doors up from my house? That just didn't make sense to me. And
that was so important.
It was something very important, and he was quoting numbers and statistics that I said, this is not possible. So I really brushed him off. And quite honestly, what he was telling me, we were having actually it was my 50th birthday party now that I think about it. So I know exactly how long ago it was. And he came up and he said, you've got to give a pamphlet to, we had a lady who was serving and cleaning up and whatever. I had never met her before, just hired her for the party. He said, she's got a pituitary tumor. Now, keep in mind that I had no knowledge whatsoever of any of this, and he's telling me that this person, and he's looking at her for the first time, and he's not a medical doctor, and he's telling me he knows a diagnosis for this person. Sounded really crazy to me. And I wasn't going to give this lady a brochure because I didn't even know her. I now know what the diagnosis is that he was telling me, and I now know why it was so easy for him to make that determination. But that's only after many years. So many years later, there was yet another party, only this time it was at his house. And he said, you got to come in and look at this website. So I sighed. Now, it probably helped that just a few months before that, I had fallen and bumped my head, and I got a concussion. And I was ice skating, actually. I'm not a very good ice skater, obviously. And I was told initially by the doctors that the concussion was mild, and, in a few days, you're just going to be fine. And then, like 2 weeks later, I was getting worse and went back to the doctor, and the doctor said, okay, it's still a mild concussion. Give it another week or so. You'll be just fine. Now, a month goes by, and I'm getting even worse. I'm having a hard time walking. I had to tell most of my patients, my clients that I work with, that I was not actually drinking, because I would walk down the hallway like this and was having a hard time standing and doing basic functions. And I started doing twitches and had a hard time driving, finding my way around. I was really quite not doing well at all. And anyway, so you know the story. I went to many doctors, and I still have some mild symptoms, and it's now almost 5 years later. I still know that I have a bleed in my brain, which at the last time that I talked to the neurologist, he still said, it's not much of a big deal. Don't worry about it. Now we know that Dr. Kelly is doing some research on head trauma, and so every day I kind of go, okay, when's the tumor developing? So that's kind of what brought me here, is that I decided to look again at this issue because I thought that it sounded too profound and too amazing, and I needed to not only see what the information was that I saw on the website for the PNA, but I needed to do my own investigation, so I started reading. And then I agreed to do one article. Now, after a week ago, I just got back from doing a national conference where Bob and I presented to a group of mental health professionals, and I'll mention a little bit of that here. So that one little article has developed into an awful lot, and I'm on the board of directors I'm the only mental health professional on the board of directors for the PNA, and I would like that to increase and get more people, and part of my mission is to educate my profession because I believe it's really important. I'm going to talk today about hormones and mental health, advancements and advocacy for patients. Now, I am not a medical doctor, and I am talking in terms of mental health when I'm talking about advancements, so we're not going to be talking about neurosurgical technique. I figure that Dr. Kelly has more than enough expertise in that area, so we won't go in that respect. I also really wanted to provide a little bit of what I thought of as inspiration and a little bit of depth of thought. So I'm going to integrate a few thoughts that have come across my table in my journey. When we talk about an integrated model of health, these are some terms that I'm finding as ways for you all to perhaps find help. And sometimes you have to know the right catchwords. So integrated is an important kind of catchphrase that's being used in today's world. And this Angela Diaz at Mount Sinai Medical Center talked about to see people as whole, not pieces. What a concept. It's been a while, but these are things that are beginning to be seen out there. So when we're looking at hormones in general and talking about advancements, I'm going to tell, from what I can tell at least. This is a quote from a book that I'll talk to you a little bit about, and what they talk about is a quiet storm, and I just thought that this was a good title and an interesting quote. Most people with concealed illnesses or pain do not gracefully surrender. They valiantly do battle with their symptoms and yearn for their previous life. Chronic pain is very real. Even the medical community doesn't always take my pain seriously. This is from, I've got a couple of books that I brought just as an example, and I'm going to let you look over them. This one is called Just Fine, Unmasking Concealed Chronic Illness and Pain. So I'm going to pass that around a little bit. I think that many of us here in the room may or may not have pain, physical pain, in the same terms as perhaps somebody that has a broken arm or a leg, or may, but I think there's many different forms of pain. There's the pain of a loss of a life that you once knew or a life that you thought you were going to have. A loss of a dream, I think, is very painful. I think there's a lot of different losses, particularly when there's something neurologically going on. And certainly there's pain with family members and other people around. And so I really use that term in a very broad sense, and I think that it's really important to recognize. And when I talk to patients and I read things, I think one of the hardest things that even from my own little experience of having a bump on the head was, and other physical things that I've dealt with over the years, is really, really wanting someone to validate, wanting a medical professional to look me in the eye and really get that I am suffering. I don't care what it is. And so I think that that's part of my quest, too, is to bring the medical and the mental health community together so that we can work much better together for the service of patients. I do a lot of work with children. And one of the things that I have come to believe, I'd really like to, in our fiscal times, I probably would be more conservative, but I think if I had a lot of money that I didn't really worry about stock market prices, I would invest in Band-Aids. And this is the reason why. I don't know how many of you have children or grandchildren, okay? Oftentimes, I don't know if you remember times when a little child will come up to you and they'll have a little hurt, right? And it's so small, and you're busy, you're doing whatever, and the child goes, look, I'm hurting. There's blood. Oh my gosh, there's blood. And you go, nah, it's okay, you'll be fine, right? No. And then they have to really put it in your face. Look, and then you finally look, and you really have to check and find that little tiny bit of blood, right? The second that you stop, you go and you open that little Band-Aid box, and today they've got the cool little characters on them and, you know, all the nifty colors or whatever. You open that out and you put that Band-Aid on that child's baby little wound. Most of the time what you're going to get is, okay, can I go play now? Right? What the Band-Aid does is it validates. It validates, I see your pain. I know you're hurting. That's all they want. They need validation. And I think that's what a lot of us need too. We need to be validated that what we're experiencing is real. Even if we have a hard time describing it exactly, and you don't quite exactly get it, but you're at least trying to get it. Some of the research on the medical and emotional relationship links, I just thought that I would kind of pull up a couple of things. They've done some effects of chronic illness on individuals, which there have been many studies on the effects of chronic illness that are so profound. And when we're talking about chronic, it means not something that's acute, short-term, it's there, it's painful, it's done, it's over. We're talking about things that last months, years, decades, a lifetime. And those are life-altering things. And a lot of the research shows that it's not just an effect on the individual person. It affects your family, it affects marriages, it affects parent-child relationships, it affects work relationships. So a lot of the literature, and there's quite a bit of literature that's out there. Importance of marital adjustment is a critical factor influencing emotional adjustment to couple relating when there is a chronically ill family member. The impact of any kind of chronic illness on marital relationships. There's a lot of marriages that break up. I have talked to patients around the country on the phone about either family members that are calling and saying, I just know my husband has all the symptoms. I've gone on the website, or I've done, you know, research, I've checked here or there, but he or she won't go and get help. They won't, you know, they're not going to seek help. What can I do? The pain in those voices and the frustration of trying to get somebody to understand and go get the help, or the other issue of trying to even just find the help. People that are, luckily we live in a major metropolitan area. We have people like Dr. Kelly here locally. My practice is in Ventura County, and I can't tell you the number of people that don't want to drive from Ventura County into the city. It's a big deal for them to drive. But I talk to people who are in South Dakota, and their nearest major medical center is 200 miles away. I mean, we are phenomenally lucky. And if they drive 200 miles, they don't have a specialist in pituitary neuroendocrinology because they don't exist in many parts of this country. So we are so lucky to be able to have the kind of resources that we have. California has several top doctors, and that's really wonderful. We have risks for coronary heart disease that include those that are heightened by certain characteristics in a spouse. You've got these cross-spouse risk factors or type A personalities. If you have somebody that you're living with that has chronic illness, it increases your risk factors as well for physical illness. So these are things that we have to recognize because we know, probably many of you are aware of the effects of cortisol. Cortisol is affected by stress. So when you have somebody, it's not even if you're a pituitary patient, but if you live with somebody that has these issues, then it increases your physical illness factors. There's a correlation between pituitary and hormonal health and a societal burden. And this is just kind of a little graphic that shows that this affects our culture as a whole very profoundly. If you've got somebody who suffers from depression, apathy, for example, which is very much pituitary related, the patient frequently becomes part of the public system. If you don't care, if you're flatline, you're less likely to get up and go to work, you're less likely to go on websites to do research, you're less likely to interact. You're more likely to be in a basement of somebody's house and be pretty much non-functional. If at some point you're going to eventually run the risk of having to get public assistance because there is nobody around other than the state. The patient fails to thrive and obviously might lose a family, job, etc. Misdiagnoses, obviously, because there's either inability or to find the help, or there's just not the help available. And then obviously you've got patients with lots and lots of symptoms. I brought this up because this was a Newsweek article, and I'm trying to talk about things that are current and some of the things that are happening. And I just happened to pick this up. It was an issue regarding the brain, and it was entitled Sad Brain, Happy Brain. And it wasn't about pituitary issues specifically, but I thought it was relevant. For about 400 years, following the ideas of French philosopher René Descartes, those who thought about its nature considered the mind related to the body, but separate from it. In this model, it was called dualism, or the mind-body problem. The mind was immaterial. It really wasn't seen as important. It was like the mind was kind of separated over here. Not anchored in anything physical. If it didn't exist, if it wasn't concrete back then it really was considered not that important. And this started a whole problem that we still deal with today. Today, neuroscientists are finding abundant evidence of an idea that even Freud played with more than 100 years ago, that separating the mind from the brain makes no sense. And I will say that this is, again, being in Newsweek, it's very welcome to be able to see these kinds of things, where we're beginning to see that this mind-body split, which was really, historically, a political issue. And it was really based on finances, on power, and we know about power and politics, right? We just got done with a major political season ourselves. And in my field, Freud was playing with a lot of these ideas, and they all got suppressed because it just wasn't popular. It wasn't cool. We know that these things happen. So we had people that had a hint to how things should be. I have been showing this slide all over, up and down the state as well as throughout the country, because I was so impressed with what Dr. Kelly had to say, which is the pituitary is the crossroads between the brain and the body. Phenomenal statement. There have been a lot of studies and a lot of focus on what we call quality of life. There's studies that are done about cells and, what you can see, and about MRI studies and about slides and a lot of that, very scientific stuff. But they've also been doing a lot of studies on what about somebody's quality of life? What does that mean? We can stitch them up. We can do surgery, we can do lots of things, but really how are they before and after their treatment? And what does it really mean to have full spectrum treatment? This study by Mary Lee Vance was a questionnaire kind of study. It was done throughout 7 countries, so that's important. And I won't go through all the details of it, but they were looking at neuroendocrine disorders, including Cushing's, acromegaly, prolactinomas, and non-functional tumors, and they matched it with control people that didn't have any of those. And one of the things they found is that there was a gender and an age issue in the studies. Women scored worse in general, quality of life overall, anybody that had these disorders, as compared to the control group. A control group is a sampling of people that don't have any of these issues. Social isolation was identified with the neuroendocrine group, especially those that had growth hormone deficiencies. Thought that was interesting. Most of the people in this study reported that they'd been having symptoms for 10 to 15 years. And this doesn't surprise me any longer. I think it's sad. It's extremely sad. And these are the kind of figures that when I go and I talk to people in my profession, they seem so extraordinary that it's hard for them to open their minds to this. But these are things that and I know that Sharman is very familiar with these kinds of statistics. Substantial improvements post-medical treatment were shown, so that's a hopeful thing. Hypopit in any degree was really decreased the quality of life for people. And they did a hospital and anxiety and depression screening, and the more depression and anxiety this person had, the worse all the other scores were, which kind of makes sense. If somebody's really feeling emotionally lousy, they're probably going to do worse in lots of other areas of work life, managing their lives, financial stability, marital stability, all those other kinds of factors that happens. And then they did a follow-up of 13 years for these people, so it was a fairly significant study. As far as modern advances in neuroscience, it no longer allows us to draw clear demarcations between the psychological, quote-unquote, and the biological. Now, the reason why I put this one up here is that Bessel van der Kolk and Alexander McFarlane and Lars are not medical doctors. Well, they are, but they are psychiatrists. They're in my field. And when I see things like this, again, I'm out there looking for what can I find in the psychological field that's going to help us link with these brilliant neuroendocrine surgeons and neuroendocrine doctors so that we can begin building a bridge, really, between these two. So, again, I think patients are the ones who are going to win. So when I look in there. Now, I will tell you that I have been doing search after search after search in the psychological literature, the academic kind of stuff. And I have, on just a few occasions, is the pituitary even mentioned. And I'm talking about brilliant doctors and brilliant writers and brilliant academicians, people that are teaching in universities. They're teaching people in my profession. And they do kind of mention the endocrine system as having something to do with stress, having something to do with trauma. There's a relationship. They are recognizing that when somebody goes through, for example, huge emotional, either in childhood or other times in their lives, when they've had a lot of cortisol in their system, that there's a possibility that later on that tumors may grow. Now, we can't say there's an exact cause and effect. There's no exact, oh yeah, we know that 8.2 years later you're going to get a tumor. We haven't gotten there yet. Maybe someday, I don't know. But at least they're starting to recognize that the endocrine system is a significant portion of what we need to look at, along with the immune system. I mean, we are talking a lot about the immune system as well. Gahil Gibran, who wrote The Prophet a long time ago, said, "The obvious is that which is never seen until someone expresses it simply." I think that that applies here. I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to express it in as simple of terms as possible, not only to primary care doctors and nurses and the medical community, but to my profession, the mental health community, and obviously to the media and to people in general, to let them know that this is much more prevalent. 1 in 5. Those are the statistics, is 1 in 5 of all of us have a pituitary tumor. That's phenomenal. It's 20%. Now, I'm not saying that all of us have symptoms. And we don't even know how much. We think about a third of them. About a third of a fifth, if you want to do the math worldwide. This is worldwide, by the way. And these are what's called a meta-analytic study, which is it studies other studies, and this was studies of cadaver studies, where they actually just took people and, post-mortem, looked at their brains, and they found, oh, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tumor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tumor. Amazing. This is not rare. So here's some statistics and an estimated of 60 million people in the United States alone. When we're looking at the cycle of treatment in today's world, most patients will require pharmaceuticals for treatment, maintenance, and control for the duration of their life. That is a fact of life for many pituitary patients, and so we require a team. And I think that development of a team is really important. It includes mental health, which I can talk a lot about, but obviously prescription pharmaceuticals, the neuroendocrine factor. Insurance is a reality of our life. It is a huge reality, and having to work through that maze of being able to deal with that. The family doctor, very important. The pituitary network, Charman's group here, many other support online, as well as family and friends, all part of the patient needs. Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. And hopefully we're going to keep people from ignoring them any farther. When we look for risks of misdiagnoses, there's an awful lot of them. This is a never-ending circle that is a very sad circle. If you look at 20% of mankind that suffer from pituitary or neuroendocrine disorders. You said I had a little pointer thingy?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Oh, how cool. We'll start up here at the top. 80% of medical costs go towards treatment of potential disabling disorders in general. 50% of physicians daily, of a daily physician's patient load consists of patients with mystery illnesses. Physicians are dealing with a lot of things that are not real easy to decide, and these filter into that factor because it isn't always a real easy, clear-cut picture. Obviously, if it takes people years and decades to get diagnosed, we're not saying that these are easy things. Sometimes if you just know what you're looking for, it can be a little easier, but at any rate. Yeah, it's what are you looking for? Untreated patients frequently end up on disability. We've talked about that a little bit, or Social Security. Untreated disorders can increase suicide risk hugely, as well as family violence. Then you've got the pituitary and hormonal disorders. They can be treated, that's important. But again, they have to get to the treatment, and unfortunately, we've got lots and lots of misses. So, in my experience thus far, I've not just with neuroendocrine pituitary disorders, but I think in working with my caseload, I have come to realize that in spite of my what I think of as my little 5-year-old inside that wants to kick and scream and have a temper tantrum that the world shouldn't be this way, I think we have to advocate for ourselves. Now, this is me on Halloween at this national conference that I was at. I threw that in because I think having a little humor is also really important. We dressed up for Halloween. We had some children, but this was the Pituitary Network Association's booth that they've had for the last couple of years at this national conference for mental health professionals. Now, I will tell you that one of my experiences is that the mental health people go by and have you ever had a dog that hears a really shrill sound and they kind of go like this, right? That's kind of what the reaction is for most of the mental health professionals as they go by and they go, pituitary? Oh, and they stand.
That's what they do when I go to doctor's conferences.
They stand about this far away, and it's almost like they walk away. They're afraid that it's going to catch them or something.
Yeah.
And they really don't understand. So, dressed up like this as a witch, using my magic, so to speak. I took my grandchildren to see Wicked, which is why I dressed up like this, because, anyway, it's a long story, but anyway, I do these funny things with my grandchildren. So one of the things that Wicked, which I love, the play, is that Wicked is the wicked witch of the West, and you see the play may not be the wicked that you think it is. Maybe wicked has a different term to it. But I won't prevent you from going to see the play because I think it's got a lovely message to it. But I would stand out there and I felt like I was in a carnival, like old-time carnival. Come on, no, really, you've got to come over here. You've got to come over here. Come on, this really has something to do with you. This will change your practice. Come on over. And people would eventually kind of slowly come over. We had all kinds of handouts. We'd hand them things. I'd start talking to people. And I will tell you that I can't tell you how many therapists would come in, and once they started talking, they'd say, oh, my sister had a tumor of some sort, or my next door neighbor, or oh, I've got a patient that, and they'd start describing, do you think this would have anything to do with, I'd say, this is important. So once we would start talking, I begin to get all of this generated information about this isn't rare. It is not the rarity that, we were once told. Leadership is the mobilization of personal and group resources to face, define, and resolve problems. To me, that's what all of you are doing here today and what you do in your lives on an individual basis, a personal basis. As a group, we're trying, as the Pituitary Network and some of the things that Charmin is doing, trying to do this, we're trying to find out the solutions. Because if there's one thing that I want to talk about is we could talk about all the pain and the suffering and the frustration, which there's a lot of, and the individual and collective difficulties with anything from insurance to medical, financial issues to personal family issues, whatever. But I would rather have us really focus on what can we do, not just what the problems are. What are the solutions? Because I do think that we are making progress. And if there's one thing that I'm seeing is there is a slow turning. Number one, I see fewer and fewer people, after they twist their heads, they're at least beginning to listen. They're seeing the things that I'm handing to them, and they're beginning to say, oh, this is relevant. We have small people, groups of therapists that are coming to our conferences, but they are coming. And they do email, and they are following up, and so that's, I see as hopeful. I may not live to see the day when every single doctor and every therapist is fully educated, and the general community, and that we don't have to wait so long for these diagnoses and for treatment, but we're working on it. This is just some of the advocacy that is going on within the Pituitary Network, which includes patients contact the PNA, they seek treatment. I keep forgetting I've got this nifty little thing. They're seeking treatment. The endocrinologist, obviously with a specialized focus and specialized training, we know that you have to get those top specialists, work on getting the diagnosis. That's important. Then the neurosurgeons, with obviously the top specialists, work on treatment, the specialized treatment. The neuroendocrine side, where you've got the medical, the pharmacological treatment, part of the treatment issue. Then we got insurance, which is a reality, and trying to deal with the claims and all that. Or no insurance, right. Yes. That's part of the advocacy. That's part of having collectively as groups trying to help advocate people to be able to continue their treatment. Mental health specialists being able to help with the communication between, first of all, for the patient to the therapist. Sometimes, and I can talk a little bit about my experience, for some people it's hard to just explain, how do you feel? I've been working with this young man who came to see me about a year ago, actually, just about a year ago. And I did something with him that I never would have done as a trained mental health professional, which I'm getting more bold in my old age and my experience, is after about 10 minutes in the room with him, I stopped and I said, I'm going to do something that I don't normally do in a typical therapeutic intake. So I started asking him questions that were much more related to how long have you been the size that you are? As a child, when did you start shaving? 6th grade, okay. What about your sexual development? I probably wouldn't have normally said that early on, that certainly within the first 10 minutes of seeing somebody. How about your social life? What about mental confusion? I started asking these questions that typically were not part of what I would do. And of course I was getting, yeah. So by the end of the first session I said, you have got to see, here, go see this doctor. This is just not something I normally would do. What I would tell you is that I've learned from working with this particular man, and I presented his case in a video that I presented in Memphis, and the audience was overwhelmingly very appreciative because they had a face to put to, oh, this is a real person, this is what this looks like. But one of the things that happened when I was videotaping him, and I have full authorization, he gave me permission to be able to talk about his case, is that I started videotaping him, and he was talking about his experiences, and so we got done, and we shut off the videotape, and then I started asking him, I said, you know, we've been working together for a little while. I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being good, feeling positive, feeling not depressed, not suicidal. He'd been suicidal a year ago when I first saw him. I said, well, how are you doing today? He says, oh, today's a pretty good day. I'm doing about a 4. Okay. I said, you know, you were just telling me that you're waiting for a diagnosis to come back from your mom of possible breast cancer. Yeah. And this was a 4-week. I said, so where were you like a year ago? 1. I said, I'm going to roll the tape again, and I'd like you to talk about how did you present when you first went to your primary care doctor and then when you went to the endocrinologist. And so then he got in, and I said, when you went and talked, did you cry? Did you complain? Did you really talk about 1 to 10 and talk about the 1? Nope, not at all. Flat, completely flat. He did not provide the intensity. And I got to tell you that doctors are human beings. They're just real people. And doctors have to have information. They have to be informed, and they also respond to us as human beings. And that's one of the things that that book about how doctors think kind of talks about, which is they need to have something to go by. And I said, you got to scream and shout. You've got to advocate for yourself. You've got to let your doctors know that you are in pain. But one of the side effects of having a anterior pituitary tumor, which is what he was diagnosed with, which he wouldn't have gotten diagnosed unless I had sent him, is he's flat. He's apathetic, what we call apathetic. Oh, it is the error of our day that the physician separates the soul from the body. Plato. Long time ago. Thousands of years ago. And my goodness, here we are again. Where it seems sometimes we've just done full circle. Harvey Cushing said, a physician is obligated to consider more than a diseased organ, more even than the whole man. He must view the man in his world. I think very wise words. There's lots of hormonal disorders, obviously, and more than even on the list, but at least I think we're beginning now to investigate and to look further into the effects, not just on the physical part of the brain, but on what are the emotional, the societal effects, all kinds of ways. So I think it's important. And then there's the question, which I don't have the answer to. Okay, is it chicken, egg, or is it a little bit of both? Most of the stories that I hear is that most of these neuroendocrine pituitary disorders have some kind of psychiatric, psychological, whatever kind of words you want to use, symptoms. And so, which started what? Did they create the tumor? Did the tumor create those? I don't know. I don't know if we ever will know. But I think it's important to begin seeing it as a whole and not having to separate it out just because somebody says, yes, it's all in your head. Well, okay, it is. And what's wrong with that? As far as I know, the blood vessels that are up here are the same ones that are down here. And maybe we need to stop seeing the two as so very, very different. So if you're looking at taking charge of your life and your health, whatever, I just made a list of some things that I think are important. Obviously, you got to learn to advocate for yourself. Advocate for yourself, but also for other people. And I think by other people, it can be as simple as, you're at a cocktail party, and rather than not talking about your experience, you kind of share and you educate somebody else there. That's one more person or two more people that are going to know a little bit more about this, and that it's not rare. And again, that whole idea of 5 degrees of separation, I think is really true, because my experience is if you tell one person, they're going to say, oh yeah, I know so and so, or my next door neighbor, or whatever. Now all of a sudden we're confirmed that these things are much more common than certainly we've been taught. Forming a support team. I don't think any chronic illness, but particularly pituitary tumors, I think we have to have a support team. Number one, it's hard walking into any, particularly a specialist's office. These doctors have limited amount of time. They know what they're looking for, but again, we have to be able to know how to talk to them. We have to be prepared. I recommend that you begin making a file folder for yourself. This is part of advocacy, personal advocacy. And if you can't do it yourself, if your energy level is low, you're just exhausted, then you need to find somebody who you can maybe delegate one little job. Your job is to keep records. You can be my record keeper. I'll call you up and you write it in some Word document, and then when I ask you for it, print it out and hand it to me. Or get somebody who's going to go with you to some of these doctor's appointments. There are a couple of catchwords if you're out there looking for mental health people. First of all, I'm willing to consult with anybody that is open and doesn't know anything about this, but they've got an open mind. And they can do the least they can do is go on some websites and educate themselves. Anytime I have somebody that's got a physical illness that I don't know about, I have to go and educate myself. Just so that I'm competent enough. I don't have to be an expert in it, but I do have to know enough so that I understand what that person is going through, what their experiences are. There are people, there's a whole organization that is working on what they call collaborative family health or collaborative medical care, where we have mental health professionals work either in medical centers or in doctors' offices where they're working alongside. Where part of the job as the mental health professional is, first of all, we spend more time with patients than the doctors do. We want patients to be able to know how to communicate with their doctors, so that's part of our job. So the doctors could feel comfortable working with us to be able to help the patients be compliant. I have a lot of people for lots of reasons who will come in and I'll say, are you taking your medications? Well, not exactly, because I don't really, it gives me a dry mouth, or I get constipated, or whatever it may be. And I'll say, did you tell your doctor? Well, no, not really. Okay, we have to be able to bridge that together. So we have to be able to work together. If it's a problem, then we have to find a way to be able to help the doctor understand and keep trying other things. So the mental health professional can work very collaboratively. So sometimes just using words like, do you know how to work collaboratively? If somebody says, no, I've never heard that term, click, okay, go and find somebody different. Would you be willing to consult with another mental health professional? No, I don't do that. Click, okay, go find somebody else. There's lots of us out there. You got to find the person that works for you. You also have to trust your gut. Seeing somebody that you're going to share very personal kinds of stories. It could be family issues. It could be sexuality issues. Lots of things are very personal to you. You want to trust that person, and you want to trust that they have competence and that they hear you, and that they're not just going to nod their heads and say, and you're going to walk away and say, okay, I cried for an hour, now what do I do? You need to have some tools. They're not going to fix you. This is working collaboratively with the therapist as well. And the doctor alone isn't going to fix you. This is a team effort, and the patient is part of all of it too. We all have to work together. Finding peers, obviously you here in this room. This is enormously powerful and important. Just phenomenally important. And there's a lot of research that says that people in general, there's more research on cancer patients in general who go to some kind of support group, that they live longer, and they live a happier existence if they have peer support.
It's
Real good.
With Weight Watchers too.
Yeah.
If you attend meetings.
Yeah.
That you actually lose more weight.
having somebody to go and be accountable to, and that's where a therapist can be helpful too. Just knowing that you're going to have to face that person and you go, oh dear, did I do what I said I was going to do? You know, there's a certain amount of personal accountability that is helpful there. Obviously, if we're looking at follow-up, you got to follow up with treatment. You got to follow up with all the things that you got to do. I've worked with a fair number of pituitary patients, and I guess I would turn to Charmin. One of the things that I'm having to do is recognize that it's like dragging a ball and chain, I'm sorry, and I have to learn to be more powerful and get a buy-in on, is it okay if I call you? This one young man that I'm talking to, he's got the diagnosis. He won't go back to the doctor as a follow-up. So I had to say, is it okay with you if I keep bugging you? Oh, yeah, I don't mind if you bug me. That's fine. I said, because that's...
Men are they're the really
So, yeah. Sorry, we're just, you know, kind of...
Thank God you don't throw things.
I think it's real important to stay up on the research. And again, some of that is just having to be your own advocate, you know, join listservs and chat groups and blog groups, and wherever you can get, you have to be careful about what the sources are, obviously. You want to have good resources.
Can I say one thing too?
Absolutely. Again, you want to be very specific as much as possible. You got to plan as much as you possibly can. I want to go back to, you got to listen to your body, your heart, and your soul. I think that that's really important. Again, when some of these books, this one says you don't look sick. And these are not specific to neuroendocrine disorders, because I don't think, at least if I've found, they haven't been written yet. I may be working on that, but anyway. But again, if you don't on the outside, number one, your family members are going to say, well, what's the matter with you? You don't look sick. Why are you so tired? What's wrong with you? Why are you angry? But it's also important, again, when we're talking about even years later, to really know yourself and to trust your gut. If something's not right, that's important to trust. And sometimes it's just a feeling. But it's important not to disregard it, because, again, you've only got one body, one life, and you've got to really listen to that. And again, you've got to find people that you trust in your heart, that you know that they're on the right side for you, whether it's a doctor, a therapist, a best friend, next door neighbor, whatever it may be. But you've got to, again, trust that and not let yourself just go with somebody else's idea or opinion, or some expert. You've got to really know that this is the right person for you. You want to understand communication. The one about how doctors think, the one thing that kept coming through from what he said is you need to be able to communicate with your doctor, and your doctor needs to be able to communicate back to you. It's a two-way street. And if you meet with a doctor and they're not getting it, then you've got to get to a different doctor. Or you've got to figure out what's going on for you, that you're not being able to get your information across, because it's like a radio signal. You have a radio station sends out a perfectly good signal, but and this is thinking old time here, old technology, or pre-technology, if the station isn't quite tuned in, it's not the radio station's fault, but it's the tuner's fault. Or so we have to be able to know that you're sending out the right message. And you got to be able to ask lots and lots of questions, and that's really important. These are some of the resources that I mentioned there. If any of you just want, I'll leave them up there on the screen. This is another one. This is by somebody in my field. It's called The Body Bears the Burden, Trauma, Dissociation, and Disease. Again, this is one of many that talks about the impact of stress, chronic stress particularly, on the body, that we're beginning to see that not just pituitary tumors, but other parts of the body wear out. I think of it as kind of like if you're driving a new car, and it's right out of the factory. It's got new tires and new oil and new everything. It's going to run pretty well, and you don't have to maintain it too much. But after a period of time, and particularly if you've been running it rough and hard, and you've been revving those RPMs up, and you haven't been changing your oil like Jiffy Lubes tells you to do every 3,000 miles, then parts are going to start to wear out. Things are going to go wrong, and it's going to require more maintenance. And some of us get a lemon, We just do, you know, and some of us just get certain models that things go wrong. And we can complain about it, but the best that we can do is deal with it and find the best way that we can be able to maintain it and make that car work as best as we can. So I encourage all of you to ask any questions or to share with each other. I think we're just about out of time. I tend to run off with the mouth. So I hope that some of this was helpful to you.